Should we do a Rapture Index update?
I think we need to before Gog and Magog. It's too perfect.
It's been a while.
Let's see.
This is the one you've been looking forward to.
I
Nick.
know, Gog
I'm
and
so
Magog.
excited for you, man.
184, so it's down a point, which is crazy because since the last update, we've had an attempted presidential assassination, which obviously is 100% an eschatological event.
Yeah, it talks about that in the Bible.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The whole all prophecy in the Bible is about America in the 2000s.
Every single bit of it.
The key to understanding the prophetic works is to understand that it didn't mean anything until today.
That's the number one.
So we're lucky.
Starting point.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's the number one starting point. So yeah, Rapture Index is down 184. Sorry, all of you that were hoping to be raptured today.
But then how can I use fear to sell a book?
Oh, that's a good point.
Oh yeah.
That's a good question.
Yeah. It's always about making the money.
Gog and Magog.
Where's that nice lobby music coming from?
The lobby.
In here.
Do you hear it? It's just like a nice little...
It is, yeah. It's got those elevator vibes.
Yeah.
Smooth jazz. There was a radio station in Chicago when I was a kid. Smooth Jazz, WNUA 95.5.
You have a good radio voice.
Thank you. I used to turn it on because we weren't allowed to listen to kind of secular radio or whatever. And so we would listen to this smooth jazz. And then I got into jazz in my 20s, and I was like, wow, smooth jazz is garbage. Do you know what I mean? I'm listening to some Miles Davis fusion record from the 70s, and I'm like, this is amazing. Why? How did I not know about this when I was a kid?
Did that have Delilah on it, After Hours?
That's what I was just going to ask you guys.
I don't know.
Because I thought she was just in my city, and then I recently found out that
she's
she's
here.
Mrs.
National.
Worldwide.
Yeah, I remember because I had an 81 Volkswagen Rabbit, and for a while it had the original factory stereo.
Yeah.
Which could pick up ham radio operators in Western Europe.
Whoa.
And 2 radio stations in Phoenix.
Oh, nice.
And one of them was the smooth jazz with Delilah.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, she had a good radio voice.
Yeah, you're listening to it as a kid, and these people are calling in and telling about their super complicated relationship issues.
You're like, I don't want to grow up.
Oh no, yeah. To fall asleep in the back of your mom's car. That was that was actually my experience.
It's a great story.
Man,
and that was 2 weeks ago.
Yeah.
I haven't thought about ham radio in a long time. That is great.
Yeah.
My 8th grade science teacher was a licensed ham radio operator.
Same.
He brought it into school and showed it to all of us, and it was so cool. And it was amazing because he was promoting it as this is a really cool thing, kind of old school thing to be a part of, right? But then think about it. I'm 12. Should I be with unfiltered access to truckers nationwide?
Valid.
Yeah, I recently found out there is a whole world to the radio hobby because I got a police scanner for Christmas and I had to watch all these YouTube videos on how to use it.
Merry
and
Christmas.
then it was my one wish for Santa.
Dude, what is it though? Because my 8th grade science teacher also had a ham radio, and he was teaching biology, but he talked about ham. He had one in his classroom. He would show us his pictures of his setup at his house with a gigantic tower in his backyard.
Was it a Christian school?
No, it was public.
Okay, see, that's
Public middle
surprising
school.
to me because Christian schools, at least the one I went to, when it comes to science, it's just do whatever you want. That teacher that I'm talking about, he was great, but he just came in one day and said, we're going to do a flight simulator for the entire 4th quarter for science.
That's awesome.
Maybe ham
I'd
radio
been
was the first form of Omegle. Do
Then
you remember that website?
The thing I remember him telling us about ham radio was that when Amelia Earhart went missing, there were she fell off the radar and supposedly had beached her plane on an island in the South Pacific and was trying to communicate from the plane. There were people in Florida in the United States that were able to pick up during certain hours her transmissions, people all over the world. And there was an agency set up in the U.S. to receive all the reports that people were ham radio operators who just because ham radio it bounces off the atmosphere. It's able to travel all over the world. And I just thought it was so fascinating to me that in the 40s and 50s people are able to communicate around the world.
That is crazy.
The same way that we can now with satellites, but just using ham radios.
That's crazy.
It's
That's so cool.
kind of cryptic.
She got eaten by crabs. Have you heard that story? It's true.
I don't know, but our comment section is about to be a dumpster fire. If you start talking Amelia Earhart theories, trust me, those are some
I didn't know it was a
strong
theory.
people.
I thought it was the leading.
No, there's hotly debated. Shout out to my people, by the way, because I've spent hours online researching this and on Reddit and donating to organizations to try to find wreckage of her plane. It's bad.
That's the part of your personality that I love. I think it is so great. It's so underrated. I could listen to someone talk about something they are interested in for hours.
Yeah.
Even if I didn't care about it at all. Because I just think that's so fun.
Yeah.
Okay, so I got a meme sent in from somebody. What gives people feelings of power? Whipping out my analog Bible in church. I thought that one was pretty good. This one was my favorite one. This is from someone named
that's
Allie.
a good one.
What gives people feelings of power? Making it to Ezekiel 37 without quitting.
That's a good one.
You made it this far.
This is like right around the time I would ask in the Bible study, when we were doing this one live, I would ask, like, are you guys with me? And this woman sitting in the front, like 2 feet away from me, would just go like this.
But she kept coming.
I don't think she missed a week.
Let's go.
No positive feedback. But when I see her, she's so nice.
Yeah.
Yeah.
She's honest.
But, like, I feel like she must have understood some of it. Like,
Yeah, totally.
I don't know. It was so demotivating to me.
Yeah.
And I kept making fun of it to, like, give her an out so that she wouldn't keep doing that, and she just kept doing it.
She kept coming to the Bible study for the open bar in the back, which I thought was weird you guys did that, but it got more people.
Okay, so let's check this out. So the chapters 38 and 39 are one literary unit, and there are 7 messages. Here are the 7 messages, and this is from Lamar Cooper, and this is just a way of understanding, just kind of like a through line of understanding what is going on. And so we get this prophecy here. He says in chapter 38, the word of the Lord came to me, Son of man, set your face toward Gog of the land of Magog, the chief prince of Meshech and Tubal, and prophesy against them. So Gog is a type, a character that is utilized by prophecy. So Gog is not an individual. Gog is an evil character that is utilized by Ezekiel and Revelation. Here, I'll put this quote up for you guys. And say, verse 3, thus says the Lord, behold, I'm against you, O Gog, chief prince of Meshech and Tubal. So, some people suggest that this means that Gog is the prince of Russia, who will lead an army invading latter-day Israel. However, Meshech and Tubal are Hebrew names for people from Turkey, and these names have nothing to do with any contemporary city. The names became proverbial in Judaism. He's right, because there's a psalm that says, woe to me that I sojourn in Meshech. Though not necessarily in isolation, much like today we call an evil despot another Hitler. That's like the best way of understanding it, in my opinion. Does that make sense?
Yeah, okay.
Okay. And I will turn, verse 4, and I will put hooks into your jaws, and I will bring you out, and all your army, horses and horsemen, all of them clothed in full armor, a great host, all of them with buckler and shields, wielding swords, Persia, Cush, and Put. Remember, those are, Cush and Put are grandsons of Noah. All of them with shield and helmet, Gomer and all his hordes, Beth to Garma from the uttermost parts of the north with all his hordes. Many people are with you. So it's this cosmic battle. It's this gigantic battle. Logan, could you read verses 7 through 9?
A bug just is crawling in the Bible right now.
Oh
Really?
my gosh.
Yeah.
We should probably pray.
Sorry, 7 through 9?
Yeah.
All right, let's do it. Get ready, be prepared, you and all the hordes gathered about you, and take command of them. After many days you will be called to arms. In future years you will invade a land that is recovered from war, whose people were gathered from many nations to the mountains of Israel, which have been long desolate. They have been brought out from the nations, and now all of them live in safety. You and all your troops and the many nations with you will go up, advancing like a storm, and you will be like a cloud covering the land.
And so this is a very helpful but large piece of content here that I think will really help. This is from Ian Dugwood, who I really loved reading his commentary. But the general idea of this piece of content is showing that it isn't just people now that are trying to kind of figure out who this is at the time. This has kind of been a consistent thing. Ambrose said that Gog was the Goths, and Augustine disagreed with him.
So not like the goth kid at the lunch table in your school.
Yeah, totally.
Obviously a different group of people.
Okay.
Just it became a
Thank you.
nihilist. Dude, I listened to like 3 Smashing Pumpkins albums, and I'm going to die someday. By the 13th century, Gog had become a cipher for the Mongol hordes from the east. William Greenhill, writing in the 17th century, said that Gog was the Roman emperor, the Pope, or the Turks. So, I mean, pick a lane, big
Yeah,
guy.
seriously, he was all over the place, wasn't he?
Pick a lane. It's either, Gog's either Russia or Germany or South America, the continent.
Whoever I don't like right now.
By the 19th century, it's the Crimean War, and people are saying that it's Russia. And this is like the kind of Schofield reference Bible thing, which is one of the main Bible texts that lead people to believe in the rapture and stuff. And I don't really want to get into that because I'm tired of talking to people on the internet about it. I've had the same conversation with like 25 people on the internet. I'll say something like, name one church father that talked about the rapture, and they'll post an out-of-context quote from like a church father about the singular return of Christ and be like, there you go. And I'm like, okay, well, that's not what that's talking about. And they'll be like, yes, it is. And I'm like, okay.
Or we'll do Tim LaHaye or John.
Or like, I'll say, show me one church father that talked about the rapture, and they'll be like, I don't need to. And they'll show the First Thessalonians passage about the singular return of Christ.
Right.
And I'll be like, okay, well, it is very condescending to say to a person, read your Bible.
Yes.
Because the implication that a person hasn't read it is, I think, just ridiculous. And so I like having real discussions with people, and I have found that people don't really want to have a real discussion about the rapture, so I'm just kind of done doing it.
It's the most irritating debate tactic for me, and I feel like people dug into theology positions use it more than everybody else. And it's, you just haven't done your research. Once you do, you will then be enlightened to see the truth my way.
Totally.
And it's just like assuming all of those things that you said. It's assuming that I'm an idiot. It's assuming that I haven't read it. It's assuming that your interpretation is the only interpretation of
Totally. And
text.
True people who are good teachers always are seeking to learn more than they are seeking to teach.
Yeah.
And so it just is, it's a weird part. Like, even if someone else was wrong, wouldn't you want to hear their opinion and you can like learn something from them? You know, because we're not talking about is salvation through Jesus Christ alone. Like, we can differ in opinion. Do you know what I mean? I don't know. The end time stuff always like stirs up people like that. Someone messaged me on Instagram this weekend and said, how can I convince my mom there is no rapture? I started talking to her about it and now she won't talk to me. And I was just like, unsubscribe.
Yeah. Yeah.
God bless you. God bless you. Yeah. Unsubscribe.
You know how on TikTok people will like have a controversial statement behind them on the green screen? And then they're just doing live. There was a guy, he's like an internet preacher dude, who popped up on my feed, and this, unhealthy me stopped to comment, and it said, pre-trib rapture is the only truth, or something, capital T truth. And I just, like, in the comments, was like, where did Jesus say you have to believe in the pre-trib for salvation? Which verse was that? Yeah. And he called me out. And he's like, dude, it says, where in Jesus? He's like, you're blocked.
Yeah. Bye-bye.
And blocked me.
Baseball like, lover 1821.
Dang.
You're blocked.
And I just, like, you're so right. Like, I've learned this later in life, but I think it's so true. A true sign of maturity is being open to receiving new information, and having the ability to possibly change your opinion about something after receiving that new information.
It's a mark of spiritual maturity to have a very firm boundary around what things are black and white in the Bible, and what things are gray in the
Close
Bible.
hand, open hand. Yeah.
Exactly. So, like, if someone was like, "Hey, man, I want to talk about how there's another way to salvation other than Jesus," I'd be like, "I don't really. There's nothing really there."
We're starting from two different spots.
Yeah, right. God bless you, dude. Like, syncretism is of the devil. I love you. Have a nice day. Okay, so let's keep going. So verse 10, on this day, thus says the Lord, on that day thoughts will come into your mind and you will devise an evil scheme. And this is a really interesting verse. I have this quote up here. I think it's from Ian Dugwood. I can't remember. But Revelation 20 attributes the origin of these thoughts to Satan, because they're talking about the same time period. So Revelation is a conglomeration of all of the prophecies that have happened in the Bible that have not yet come to pass. And that's why if you just read Revelation but you don't understand the Old Testament, you'll never understand it, because there are 400 allusions to the Old Testament in Revelation, and there are only 400 verses in Revelation. So the whole thing is like did anybody watch the Seinfeld finale? The whole thing in the Seinfeld finale is like flashbacks and bringing back all of the people that hate them. It's the same thing in the Curb Your Enthusiasm finale. It's all of these people bringing back all the stories. That's what's happening in Revelation. And so, subpoint, it's interesting because Revelation 20 attributes the origin of these thoughts to Satan's. Some people say it's a contradiction, but it's actually a perfect illustration of the way that the fiery arrows of the devil come into people. Thoughts come into your mind, but Revelation says that those thoughts come from Satan, right? So it's not saying here thoughts come from your brain. It's saying thoughts come into your mind. So it's actually really good theology comes from the difference in the way that they state those things.
That's pretty interesting, because I've always kind of thought it was like a balance of like the sinful thoughts I have. Some are like from Satan, but also some are just like my natural sinful nature. What do you think about that?
Yeah, it's both.
Yeah,
for
okay,
sure.
Gotcha.
Yeah, the anti-Trinity is the world, the flesh, and the devil. So every single thing that is bad in the world, that is against the created order in Eden, is either the world, the flesh, or the devil. And you find in different segments of Christianity, they typically, often, stereotypically, and in my opinion, genuinely, pick one of those and make everything that. So like we've even heard about pastors who've cheated on their spouse, and then they say publicly it was the devil. It's like, well, you certainly didn't have no part in that.
Yeah.
And then you have other people that they think everything is the flesh. And I feel really bad for people like that, because thoughts can come into your mind from the enemy. And if you think that's your flesh, always you're going to be attacking yourself. And that really bothers me. I feel terrible for people that have that theology. And then some people think everything is the world. That would be like, what's the group of people in Pennsylvania that doesn't have any tech?
Amish.
Yeah, Amish. So those people, I'm sure, are fantastic in their own way, but they're like, the whole thing is getting rid of the world.
Yeah.
And instead of rejecting all of those, I actually think there's truth in all of those, and the synthesis of all of those is the best way of understanding the attacks that come on Christians. And you're a young pastor, you're going to get more attacks than anybody else. And so learning that theology is like the best. It's like one of the best things to learn. What's the voice of God? What's the voice of my flesh? And what's the voice of the enemy? You have those things tuned in. Oh, dude, it's so good. Thanks for asking that. and say, verse 11, I'll go up against the land of unwalled villages. I'll fall upon the quiet people who dwell securely, all of them dwelling without walls and having no bars or gates. So everybody picture Lord of the Rings in your head, whichever one you want. Picture the Battle of Helm's Deep or picture the battle in the third one. That's kind of like the scale we're talking about. There's like this huge battle. So this is all battle language. And why is this happening? It's happening because God showed his glory to Ezekiel, removed his glory from the temple, removed his people from their land, and is now going to bring them back in and promise them the glorious fulfilled city of heaven. This is like the final test. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. So it's like once we cross through this, we are in the vista of all of the God's heavenly blueprints.
I will invade a land of unwalled villages. Like what a
sounds wild, doesn't it?
Like I picture the Shire.
Yeah, exactly.
Like what a
exactly.
What an image.
Yeah.
Just unsuspecting people going about their business.
Like, you hungry, mate? Potato, a carrot, and then
just like a cart.
All the orcs come in,
being pushed around. Yeah,
totally. That's what I picture too. To seize spoil, carry off plunder, to turn your hand against the waste places that are now inhabited, and the people who were gathered from the nations who have acquired livestock and goods, who dwell at the center of the earth. One theologian described Ezekiel 38:12 as, quote, Gog having a lust for booty. He wrote that in his commentary, and I just thought...
What year did he write this? Because booty took on a very much different meaning
just,
around the 2000s.
I literally, like, I couldn't even when I read that. Yeah. I was like, this is too good, you poor man.
Because there's pirates' booty.
My mind was extremely pure. I understood.
Yeah, because you just got done hanging out with the Amish. Just a casual spiritual flex there in the middle of Landon's point.
Sheba and Dedan and the merchants of Tarshish and all its leaders will say to you, have you come to seize spoil? So this is like the big shipping port. Yeah. Have you assembled your hosts to carry off plunder, to carry away silver and gold, to take away livestock and goods, to seize great spoil? So this is materialism. This is the materialism that drives evil behavior. Think about the war in Ukraine and Russia right now. Is that not driven by some form of materialism? I'm not saying unilaterally. I'm just saying, is that not at play? Mm-hmm. Yep. Is that not at play at least partially in the Middle East? Is that not part of it? That's what that's what this prophecy is talking about. Son of man, prophesy and say to Gog, thus says the Lord, on that day when my people Israel are dwelling securely, won't you know it? You'll come from your place out of the uttermost parts of the north, and many people with you, all of them riding on horses, a great host, a mighty army. You'll come up against my people Israel like a cloud covering the land. In the latter days I will bring you against my land, that the nations may know me, when through you, O Gog, I vindicate my holiness through your eyes. Now keep in mind that when there's a prophecy from the Old Testament talking about past the New Testament, and it says Israel, it's talking about the Israel of God, which is the church of Jesus Christ, which has not replaced Israel, but is a part of the whole trajectory of what God was always doing. We have been grafted into the tree of Israel. So he's not talking about, the country of Israel. He's talking about the covenant people of Israel, which is us, and people from Israel who are people of Christ. And that also does not negate that there will probably be a massive, massive revival of Jewish people in the last days, because the Bible prophesies that. But those two things can coexist. Verse 17, thus says the Lord, are you he of whom I spoke in my former days by my servants the prophets of Israel, who in those days prophesied for years that I would bring you against them? He's talking about, if you like to write things down, he's talking about Isaiah 24, Joel chapter 3, and Zephaniah chapter 1. But in reality, you could really go all the way back to Genesis chapter 3, because he's talking about good versus evil, right? And you can even see that in the way he's talking. He sees Gog, and he's like, aren't you the one we've been talking about? Which further shows that it's not talking about a specific thing that's going to pop up in the news. But on that day, Gog will come against the land of Israel. My wrath shall be roused in my anger, for in my jealousy and in my blazing wrath I declare on that day there shall be a great earthquake in the land of Israel. And then notice it changes from second person to third person, from you to I. It did there in verse 19. The fish of the sea and the birds of the heavens and the beasts of the field and all creeping things that creep on the ground and all the people who are on the face of the earth shall quake at my presence. The mountains shall be thrown down and the cliffs shall fall and every wall tumble to the ground. This is Daniel Block says, a cosmic upheaval obliquely hinted at in the divine passive. I wish I could talk like that.
Quick question. Do we see that writing other places in the Bible? Fish in the sea, birds in the sky, and the beasts of the field. Every creature that moves on the ground. That almost feels like something that's been said before, right?
Yeah, it's like the language of Genesis, and it's kind of it's a little bit similar to the language of Goliath, a little bit. Imagine being able to write sentences like that. Wouldn't that be amazing?
Yeah.
I will summon. We should make T-shirts with that on there. Wouldn't that be amazing?
Cosmic upheaval.
1189. The cosmic upheaval is obliquely hinted at in the divine passive.
That's gonna be my email right off at the end.
Yeah.
And then Logan.
That's your signature.
Yeah.
Totally.
That'll leave people.
That's the way
Wonder
you
what's
keep
next.
the mystique.
Yeah.
It's much better than have the day you deserve.
The day you deserve.
I will
Grace
summon
and peace.
grace and peace. Have the day you deserve. The opposite of the gospel.
I guess that's true.
I will summon a sword against Gog on all my mountains, declares the Lord. Every man's sword shall be against his brother. This is reminiscent, Daniel Block, of Gideon's war against the Midianites in Judges chapter 7. Here's another Revelation connection. People have tried to distinguish the battle in Ezekiel 38 and 39 from that in Revelation 20 by noting in 39:4 the enemy invaders are destroyed as they fall on the mountains of Israel, and in Revelation 20 verse 9 they're destroyed by fire. However, this observation seems not to distinguish the two portrayals, but in fact to identify them as referring to the same battle, since Ezekiel 38 states that God slays the enemy with the sword on all my mountains. And Ezekiel 38 and 39, that God defeats the same enemy by fire. I think that that's helpful for anybody who's watching who's like a big Revelation nerd. It may seem kind of just a bit out there to include, but the truth is that little things like that really help people understand the Bible, and they also help people who are trying to differentiate things that don't need to be differentiated. Like when people say that when Jesus rose from the dead, in one gospel account it says there was 2 angels, and in one gospel account it says there was 1, and they were like, well, that's a contradiction. It's like, no, it didn't say there was only 1. Like if I go home today and I say I saw Carly and Nick, and then someone else is like, who'd you see at work today? I was like, I saw Nick. They're like, no. It's like, well, like, what are you talking about? Right. Like, what?
Liar.
Yeah, it's like, okay. I despise stuff like that. With pestilence and bloodshed, I'll enter into judgment with him. I will rain upon him and his hordes and the many people who are with him torrential rains, hailstones, fire, and sulfur. So I will show my greatness and my holiness and make myself known in the eyes of many nations. Then they will know that I am the Lord. So there's that repeating phrase again. We've seen that. I mean, it feels like over 100 times in this book. It will show, I wrote down, it will show God's greatness, God's holiness, and God's self. Okay, now here are 8 things that happen next. Carly, could you read 39, 1-6?
Yep. As for you, son of man, prophesy against Gog and say, this is what the Lord God says. Look, I am against you, Gog, chief prince of Meshech and Tubal. I will turn you around, drive you on, and lead you up from the remotest parts of the north. I will bring you against the mountains of Israel. Then I will knock your bow from your left hand, or your bow from your left hand, and make your arrows drop from your right hand. You, all your troops, and the peoples who are with you will fall on the mountains of Israel. I will give you as food to every kind of predatory bird and to the wild animals. You will fall on the open field, for I have spoken. This is the declaration of the Lord. 6. I will send fire against Magog and those who live securely on the coasts and islands. Then they will know that I am the Lord.
And so that's the 8 things that happens in that section. And then he says, and my holy name I'll make known in the midst of my people Israel. I won't let my holy name be profaned anymore. The nations shall know that I am the Lord, the Holy One in Israel. Behold, it's coming, and it will be brought about, declares the Lord God. This is the day that of which I have spoken, which is very intriguing, because day of the Lord is a motif in biblical prophecy. It does not always refer to one day. The book of Joel is based around 5 days of the Lord. But it's a repeated motif, and it's really interesting that God here says, this is the day. It's like kind of the day of days. This is like the big day of the Lord. The general idea, if you're out there and you're a Bible nerd, which I would assume if you're watching this video you must be, if when you get to day of the Lord, it's in the prophetic writings, it's always a reference to a day where reality meets with God. So God is judging, God is blessing, God is sifting, God is deciding. It's always that. It's always like reality comes fully aware of who God is and what God is doing. Logan, could you read 9 through 16?
Okay, sounds good. Then those who live in the towns of Israel will go out and use the weapons for fuel and burn them up, the small and large shields, the bows and arrows, the war clubs and spears. For 7 years they will use them for fuel. They will not need to gather wood from the fields or cut it from the forest, because they will use the weapons for fuel. Then they will plunder those who plundered them and loot those who looted them, declares the sovereign Lord. And on that day I will give Gog a burial place in Israel, in the valley of those who travel east of the sea. It will block the way of travelers, because Gog and all his hordes will be buried there. So it will be called the valley of Hamon Gog. For 7 months the Israelites will bury them in order to cleanse the land. All the people of the land will bury them, and the day I display my glory will be a memorable day for them, declares the sovereign Lord. People will be continually employed in cleansing the land. They'll spread out across the land along with the others. They will bury any bodies that are lying on the ground. After the 7 months, they will carry out a more detailed search. And as they go through the land, anyone who sees a human bone will leave a marker beside it until the gravediggers bury it in the valley of Hamon Gog, near a town called Hamanah, and so they will cleanse the land.
So you see a bunch of really interesting things there, and this is like the epic battle is... number one, they're using their weapons to keep warm, which is wild. They're so cold that they're burning their guns and stuff, or their bows and arrows and whatever. The valley of Hamon Gog there in verse 11 is a play on words of the valley of Hinnom, where there was child sacrifice and where criminals were buried. And that is such like that picture at the end of what he read is so wild. It's like you're just walking around putting a flag in the ground where there's another corpse. So later when the people are coming to bury, they'll be able to find all of them.
Yeah.
That's just like, that's wild.
It also has a feeling of like they're burning weapons for fuel. Mm-hmm. It has like a swords into plowshares type of feeling.
Yeah,
like,
totally.
Like instead of collecting weapons for future battles, we might need these later for the next, war that happens. It's it's done now. We can convert all this into fuel and stuff to keep us warm, and
totally.
It has a sense of finality to it. Like not only are they defeated, but they're systematically like buried, marked, like it's over, and we're not recycling the weapons of war for future war. We're converting them into fuel and giving life to something.
You're so right. That is like a part of that motif, which is like some of the best prophecies. The one he was referencing, if you didn't catch it, is they'll beat their swords into plowshares and study war no more.
Yeah.
So it's this idea that in the future, in God's Eden city of heaven here,
Yeah.
people are like, oh, here's a sword. We don't need that. Turn it into a tool for creating food because we don't need that anymore.
Wow.
And someone's like, I have a history book about World War II. And someone's like, we don't need that anymore.
Yeah.
It's so amazing.
This may be a little too on the nose too, but I felt like the first paragraph of God leading Gog up to a mountain and then destroying him felt like Abraham, Isaac, like a sacrifice, leading up to a sacrifice.
Yeah.
And then instead a covenant happened there.
Yeah.
And this kind of, I don't know, this kind of has the same feeling.
Yeah. It's got that Abraham, Isaac vibe. It's got that Elijah vibe. Mm-hmm. It's got that Jesus vibe.
I was thinking that, God calls Moses up to a mountain, but I don't think there's a connection there.
Yeah, that is that.
Well, he does because it's also sort of a covenant, and he gets the 10 Commandments.
Mm-hmm. The crazy one in that passage is it says in the Hebrew that God told Moses to call everyone up the mountain.
Oh,
most of the English translations translate it up to the mountain, but that isn't what it says. It says that up the mountain. So God was he did invite all of Israel to go up to the top of Mount Sinai, and they just wouldn't do it because they were terrified. So like, Moses, you go do it.
Because they were terrified, or because they could sneak an idol in while he was gone?
Maybe both.
Maybe they're just like, I'm not much into hiking. Yeah. Somebody just go up and tell me what it's all about.
Totally. They're like, I want to go, but there's this party, and this guy made this whole golden calf.
You've got to see it.
So Aaron's gonna be really upset.
Right.
I already got my 10,000 steps in for the day. I'm good.
Aaron's lie in that passage is hilarious too. He's like,
they made me do it.
He's like, I threw it in the furnace and out came this calf.
How did that? There was no mold.
Like the kid with the chocolate on his face. Like, did you eat the last cookie? No.
Yeah. It's too good.
How dare you accuse me?
It's too good. So, Logan, could you read 17 through 20?
Okay, sounds good. Son of man, this is what the sovereign Lord says. Call out to every kind of bird and all the wild animals. Assemble and come together from all around to the sacrifice I am preparing for you, the great sacrifice on the mountains of Israel. There you will eat flesh and drink blood. Yikes. You will eat the flesh of mighty men and drink the blood of the princes of the earth, as if they were rams and lambs, goats and bulls, all of them fattened animals from Bashan. At the sacrifice I am preparing for you, you will eat fat till you are glutted, and drink blood till you are drunk. At my table you will eat your fill of horses, riders, mighty men, and soldiers of every kind, declares the sovereign Lord. To what passage?
Till right there.
Okay.
So that is performance art number 15. This is the last one.
I can't figure out if this is real.
Well, it's telling animals. I feel like this is one of those verses that people use to be like, look how violent God is. Telling, it's just like your religion is crazy. He's telling people to eat other people and drink their blood. No, he's calling out to every bird and wild animals, which, is still scary, but it's somehow a little more acceptable.
He's telling Ezekiel to say this because, Ezekiel's in this vision. He's seeing this final battle, and he's like showing the finality of it because it's over, and now the birds are just going crazy on all the corpses, and that's the kind of the whole thing. And I'll get glory among the nations, and the nations shall see my judgment that I've executed, my hand that I've laid upon them. The house of Israel shall know that I am the Lord their God from that day forward, and the nations shall know that the house of Israel went into captivity for their iniquity, because they dealt so treacherously with me that I hid my face from them and gave them into the hand of their adversaries. They all fell by the sword. I dealt with them according to their uncleanness, that's like the language of Leviticus, and their transgressions, and hid my face from them. Therefore, thus says the Lord God, now I will restore the fortunes of Jacob and have mercy on the whole house of Israel. I'll be jealous for my holy name. They will forget their shame and all the treachery that they've practiced against me when they dwell securely in their land with none to make them afraid. When I've brought them back from the peoples and gathered them from their enemies' lands and through them have vindicated my holiness in the sight of many nations. Then they shall know that I am the Lord their God, because I sent them into exile among the nations, and then assembled them into their own land. I will leave none of them remaining on the nations any more, and I will not hide my face any more from them when I pour out my spirit on the house of Israel, declares the Lord. So if anyone says that that passage was fulfilled in 1949, you know that it's not, because the Spirit of the Lord has not been poured out on the house of Israel, because if it had, they would worship Jesus, because the Spirit always leads people back to Jesus Christ. So how does these chapters fit into the end times?
Ooh, I love this slide.
Here we go. So there is
It's about to get real up in here.
4 main views. There's the preterist view, which is that Revelation happened effectively and completely in AD 70. That's what some of my Bible teachers in grade school believed. There's the historicist view, which is Revelation progresses through history chronologically. And if you're newer to the Bible and you're wondering why I'm talking about Revelation right now, it's because pretty much everyone agrees that Ezekiel 38 and 39 is a part of what is happening in Revelation. Yeah. It's directly referenced. It's the same prophetic vision at different times from different people. The historicist one, I think, is the worst one. The futurist, which is the opposite of preterist, which is that effectively everything after Revelation chapter 4 happens late, like way, way, way later, and usually sequentially. Then there is a historical futurist idealist, which is that the end times prophecy in the Bible is a picture of good and evil and symbolic, but shows symbolically literal events that will happen, and I could have written, and are happening. And I know that that's kind of complicated, but take a prophecy from the Old Testament that we have seen fulfilled, and I think it will help you understand. So take Micah, O you Bethlehem, Ephrathah, though you are little, from you shall come forth he who is to be ruler of Israel. So, is that a prophecy? Yes. Did that happen? Yes. Did it happen in the way that you think it would happen based on a literal reading of the text? Absolutely not.
Yeah.
Is it about God's plan overall? Yes. Is it also about a specific event? Yes. Could people have used it between 600 when Micah made the prophecy and when Jesus was born to convince people that it had literally happened? Yes, of course. Were they right? No. Is that bad? Not really. They're just trying their best. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm. Okay.
So the way that we saw that prophecy fulfilled is the way that we will see these prophecies fulfilled. When it happens, you'll be like, yeah. And many people will think, probably me, wow, that isn't exactly the way I thought it would go down, but that is what the text is saying. Because think about the prophecy in Micah. Jesus will be ruler in Israel. Is Jesus the ruler of Israel? Yes. Is he the ruler of Israel in the way that anyone who read that prophecy would have thought? No.
Right.
Right?
Yeah.
King of the Jews on wood over his cross.
Yeah, like a political king. Yeah.
Exactly. And
wait, everybody has to pick one.
Pick a what?
We have to pick a side.
Oh, we have to pick one?
Yeah, right now. While everybody's watching.
I'm a little confused about number 1.
So I can speak to one because I'm with Landon. I choose 4, but I could easily be convinced of preterism. Like everything that happened in Revelation, mainly because I think about who wrote it and when they wrote it. John wrote it while being exiled in Patmos, and he was the Christian church was new and trying to grow and being persecuted throughout Rome, And so he was writing this sort of codified letter of encouragement to everybody. And so the preterists make a case that when it's talking about, the beast and, setting up a, statue of himself in the temple and all these things, it's referring to like Caligula, Nero, like, people who were in power at that time. But John also didn't want to get, he wanted this message circulated, and so he wrote, metaphorically. And so preterists make, I think, an interesting case, but I at the end of the day, I would be for as well.
Yeah, I like that too.
The second one, historical, is when we, number 3 is like rapture theology, things like that.
Yeah, and I think that like a big like light bulb for some people with Revelation that may be helpful, and you could read. There's 3 different versions of the David Campbell book. There's like the 600-page one, the 300-page one, and the 100-page one, and it's like really courteous of a person like that to do that. Yeah, because that's a lot of work.
Yeah, ChatGPT summarized this for me.
Yeah, so Mystery Explained is like the it's not really beginner because it's complicated. So I don't mean it like that. It's more like expert, super expert. You're a genius.
Yeah.
I can't even crack the 600-page one. It's amazing. I use it as a reference, but I couldn't make it through it. But I think when you see that the horses in Revelation are talking about the general consistency of what they are happening in between the ascension of Christ and the return of Christ, it starts to really, I think, put the book into the real perspective, and you start to really see it. Like, the Black Rider isn't COVID. but
you're referencing the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse.
But COVID is a part of what the Black Rider has brought, including Spanish flu and all of these things.
Okay.
Right?
Yeah.
That is, I think, the best way to see it. I love this. Peter Lythart made this chart. I just love content like this. Like this is what I want. I want to be on my porch. I want my kids to be playing quietly. I want to have a cigar, and I want to look at this chart and think about it. So I love when people do stuff like this. So if anyone is studying, and God bless you for studying this book, this is just a great tool that shows the connections between, because you might be thinking, well, Ezekiel's a random Old Testament book. Why do you keep referencing Revelation? Because Revelation keeps referencing Ezekiel. So that's why, and they're tandem. And everyone, I asked everyone here at the church to send in a text to like what book they wanted me to do next after this one, and they all said Revelation. Literally 80% of them, and I was like, absolutely not. Absolutely not. Took me 9 months to write this Bible study. Like, who do you think I am?
I need a vacation.
Yeah, totally.
That's
so
crazy.
That chart is
People
there.
always say that, though.
That chart is there for you. I have this quote: "The most intriguing of these connections is that between the resurrection scene of Ezekiel 37 and the first resurrection of Revelation 20, verse 5, the Revelation verse has been a difficult crux for a long time, but the link with Ezekiel might help resolve it. In Ezekiel 37, the resurrection is clearly a corporate one. The resurrection of Israel and Judah from the grave of exile that is the background to Revelation 5. Then that resurrection, too, might be a corporate one. The resurrection is the birth from the death of the new Israel." I know this stuff is complicated, but please don't be discouraged if you're watching and it's like, oh, this is complicated. It's okay. Every hobby gets really complicated the further you get into it. There are people out there who learned Elvish to read Lord of the Rings, and you're just as smart as them. And don't worry, don't be discouraged. The final return from exile, and blessed are those who share in this first resurrection. So
There's a big parallel too in that Ezekiel is all about exile and what happens and paying off the end of exile. And again, Revelation was written by John while he was in exile.
Yeah.
And so just from a starting like real life plot point, I can imagine that's why John referenced Ezekiel so much, is because he found synergy with it. And
because he's seeing it.
Yeah.
And he's a student of the Old Testament. He's like, oh, I've read about that. I've read about that. That's crazy.
He's sort of highlighting parallels between, hey, Jewish Christians and whatnot.
Yeah.
Like, we've seen this, but like we've heard about this before. Here we are.
Totally. And then he's like, but I don't get to see the wheels within wheels? Like that, what the heck? That's so unfair. I only see the scary ones?
Yeah.
He's like, this is much easier than laying on my side for a year. I'm just right about horsemen.
Yes. So true. All right. Well, thanks everybody for watching. I know this one was a lot. We're hopefully, Lord willing, going to be finishing this podcast in the next 3 episodes. Because there's a lot of blueprints. And so we are going to be looking at the glorious return of the city of God. And if you think, oh, great, it's not going to be complicated. No, it's pretty complicated. But there's a lot there, and it's really special. Plus, we get to dunk on people who are interpreting it wrong, which is fun.
And if you're an architect, tune in as well. You're going to like all the cubits and measurements.
Exactly. All right, we'll see you guys here next time.